Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be some Avatar Weiss Schwarz deck building. Specifically, this is going to be taking a standard trial deck directly out of the box and doing some upgrades to it. So we're going to do that in two stages. The first one will just be basically combining two trial decks together. So if you buy two trial decks, the main thing is that you're going to get you're going to have access to 4 copies of every card here, whereas in just one copy of a trial deck, there's some key cards here that you only have at 2 copies, including your main level 3 Aang up here. So we're going to do some basic upgrades there, and then I will do a upgrade that adds cards from the booster set to that upgraded trial deck. But we're going to have the restriction that we're only going to use commons and uncommon cards from the set. So we're staying away from the high rarity cards, so the more expensive cards, because I think at that point the quality of the booster set just really heavily outshines basically everything in the trial deck. And suddenly we're picking out the 1 or 2 really good cards from the trial deck and using them in another deck rather than still being very focused on the trial deck. So first of all, just some stats that I wrote down here. So in a stock trial deck for the Avatar set, of course, you have 18 level 0 cards. That's what we're focused on here, is basically the amount of cards that make up our 50 that are in what level. So again, keep in mind, a deck is 50 cards made up of 8 climax cards and 42 characters or event cards. So of the 42, what is your level 0, 1, 2, 3 breakdown? Straight out of the box for the Avatar trial deck, it is 18, 14, 6, 4. And then below that, you can see here I have the general ratios, which are, if you ask people who play the game more regularly, this is more of what your deck should be, unless it's doing something very special. Then it will probably break the rules here. So again, 16 to 18 level 0s, so we're fine there. 8 to 12 level 1s, we're a little bit high in the stock trial deck. 4 to 8 level 2s and 6 to 10 level 3s, depending on the quality of level 2s compared to level 3s. Some decks prefer to have quite focus more on the level 2s. In this case, we'll be focused more on level 3s, because the level 2 quality isn't particularly high. But what you'll see is that when we do the upgrade using the booster set, we're actually going to get some major upgrades when it comes to level 2. So the key upgrades for the trial deck straight out of the box. We need to add a second climax combo. Now we can't do that with 2 trial decks, because you only get 1 climax combo. That is the Avatar State Aang with Fury of the Ocean Spirit. The other climax is kind of unaffiliated. The next one would just be add level 3s, because if you saw my example game between 2 trial decks, you would have noticed that I had to pay so close attention to where the 2 copies of this card were, just to make sure that I had something to do at the higher levels. So we need more level 3s. Bump key cards from 2 to 4, and that's just a very simple thing. You'll note that if you buy a trial deck, you get a playmat. And one of the things on the inside of it, you get a bit of a strategy insert. It says here, basically, how to perform somewhat of an upgrade, a modification to the deck. And it says, cards to take out: Jet and Freedom Fighters, Sokka First Love, and Admiral Zhao killing the Moon Spirit. So it is suggesting we remove all 4 copies of Jet Freedom Fighter, which is this card here, level 1 vanilla, doesn't have an effect. It's suggesting we remove 1 copy of the level 2 Sokka and 1 copy of the level 2 Zhao to add in, what's it suggesting here? To add in, I think what they're suggesting here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, to add in an extra 2 copies of this, an extra 2 copies of this, and an extra 2 copies of this. In general, I think that is relatively good advice, in the sense that I agree straight away that what we immediately want to do with the limited card pool that we have here is definitely to add the level 3s that we need in. So that is something we will do kind of immediately. So this is going to be a pretty simple upgrade here. let me just get the other copies of these cards here and I'll add them in. So our first change here is going to be to just very simply take out all 4 copies of the jet, just because it has no effect. Now, because we've done that, we probably will have to adjust what's going on at level 1 because we've taken out so many level 1s. But we'll do that, and we will straight away put in 2 more copies of the level 3 Aang. Now we're up to 4 copies of that, and we will also add in 2 more copies of the level 3 Katara. So now you can see we're playing max copies of both of those high level cards. Let me just adjust this a little bit so you can kind of see it a bit better. So we're now at 4 copies of them. And you can see immediately the ratio has been adjusted there. We have now dropped the level 1s down to 10, and our level 3s have now gone up to 8. But what else do we need to do? The other suggestion that the leaflet said was to add in another 2 copies of this Zuko level 1, which I would definitely agree with. It's a good card. It accelerates you. You take a damage to... one, you get to look at the top card of your deck and decide if you want to keep it there. But then it allows Zuko, if he wins his battle against an opponent, to search for Katara's necklace or a character from the waiting room. So it's a good card to just get something into your hands. So I definitely agree with the idea that we want the copies of that card definitely in the deck. So that's what we are going to do. We're going to add in those 2 level 1 Zukos. So 2 more level 1 Zukos, but what do we remove? Again, we have to keep the amount of cards in the deck at 50. So adding these 2 in means we have to take something out over here. Now, I actually think they're on the right track with probably just like, yeah, you could take one of this out, one of this out. I'm probably slightly more inclined to maybe just take out the 2 copies of the other the Iroh, the other level 2, which is more of an assist card in the back row. It has a nice effect. The other effect, pay 2 stock, rest the card, and you can search your waiting room for a card. But because this effectively does something similar to that, I think it's just a little bit better. And because our top end isn't like incredible in this deck, I think that's probably, to me, the play. Again, this is where play testing is going to come in quite handy. Like, obviously when you rebuild your deck and you play with it, you kind of should keep stuff like this in mind. Like, we're taking out a certain amount of these level 2s. Which ones do you need? Do you wish you had more kind of high level assist cards? Or do you need more of the actual power level 2s like over here? That's probably the big question overall. So there's kind of one upgrade kind of straight away. Of just, we've bumped 3 cards up to 4 copies. We've gotten rid of 1 card in its entirety. And actually we've gotten rid of now a 2nd card in completion. So you can see now the ratio has been adjusted from, we were 6 level 2s, we are now down to 4 level 2s. We were only at 4 level 3s, but now we have 8 of them in the deck. So that's pretty nice. And then we look through the rest of the deck at like, okay, where do we want to make some adjustments kind of elsewhere? Well, I'd be looking at sort of Katara's necklace. I think it's a quite good event. You look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You basically add up the levels of those 2 cards you put into the waiting room, and then you get to get a card of that number out of the waiting room. So it's always going to work. Even if it's 2 climax cards, you're going to get a level 0. But realistically, you're probably going to be able to grab yourself a level 1, 2, sometimes even a 3. So bumping that up to 4 copies, I think is a good idea. I think that's going to work out well because the event, it's a free event. It costs 0, and to actually do the effect, you don't have to like discard a card. Whereas a lot of the cards across Avatar require you to either pay a stock or discard a card. So the fact that this Katara's necklace here just gets you a card, it is just kind of a straight up advantage. So I think we do want to add 2 copies of Katara's necklace in. So let me just kind of adjust stuff here. So we'll put the Zuko up here since we have some space. And now we're trying to add in more Katara's necklace. The question now is, what do we remove otherwise? I think suddenly we start looking at this little package here. The 2 copies of Zuko trapped in a cave, and the 4 copies of Aang trapped in a cave. This is a nice little combo that we have here. The Zuko gets the Aang, but it's not super exciting or impressive in my opinion. It's not really doing that much special overall. So I do think we probably straight away want to get rid of the 2 Zukos anyway. And I think that will then add us the to Katara's necklace. That way we're still trying to keep our kind of card ratios like somewhat like okay here. That's why I'm kind of being very kind of considerate about like what choices I'm making here. So you can see now the level 1s have been adjusted quite a bit. So we're now at sort of what, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 level 1s, which is where we started at. It's probably a little bit too much because what we've now done is we've lowered our level 0 amount down, and we probably need to somehow bring that kind of up again. So the obvious choice here at this point is to just, I think, take 2 of these away. Because it's just a kind of power card. Like it's effectively as close to a vanilla as you can get with a card without it being a vanilla. It does mean it can be 6,500 overall, which is more powerful than our main level 1 Zuko. But I don't think we need it at 4 anymore, especially because we're not playing the Bond. So I think what we'll do is we'll take these 2 out, and then we're going to bump up some of the other level 0s in the deck. Now, let's take a look at the level 0s, because we haven't really talked a lot about it. So this card here, Katara and Sokka siblings, is good in that it has the assist effect, which is obviously quite nice. But its other effect is to try and early play the Aang. Now you might think that because Aang is our only climax combo in the deck, and we've bumped this up to 4 copies, we have 4 copies of Fury of the Ocean Spirit, that we might want 4 copies of this. I think that is when suddenly it is too much, because most of the time this card is only doing some basic 5+500 assist kind of stuff, and we don't need 4 copies of a card where we're waiting until level 2 to be able to get a level 3 out. 2 I think is perfectly fine for this card. We're obviously going to keep the Brainstorm down here, the Sokka Brainstorm, at 4 copies. The Brainstorm is good. It's a 5 to the waiting room for each climax, draw a card. That's very nice. Similarly, Aang, the boy trapped in ice. There's the normal art, in case you weren't aware of that. The drop search, as they call it, on play, pay a stock, discard a card from your hand, search your deck for any character. Very good. We want that at 4 copies. It's at 4 copies already. Great. So we're kind of looking at these last 3 level 0s here. Katara New Necklace, Yue Moon Spirit, and Aang and Zuko Unexpected Cooperation for where will we kind of add on to here. To me, I think the Yue is fine at 2 copies because it's a power boost card, and then when you play a climax card, it's a soul boost card. It's a back row card, and you're never really going to play it in the front row unless you're in a bit of trouble. I think it's fine at 2. So what we're going to be bumping up, I think, is either the Katara New Necklace or the Aang and Zuko Unexpected Cooperation. This is our kind of power play at level 0 because in nearly all situations, when we put the Aang and Zuko on board, it will become 4,000, which is quite good for a level 0. And so far, there are only 2 copies in the deck. The Katara is basically, on play, look at the top card of your deck. If it's not a climax, you have to add it to your hand and then discard a card. I think the fact that you have to and not may means that I don't want it at 4, but I like it at 2. So it kind of has made up our decision for us that what we're going to be doing is actually bumping the Aang and Zuko up to 2 more copies. So we add that in, and that should be basically it, because I don't think there's too much else to kind of mess around with the kind of ratio here. So you can see here we now have 8 level 3s, only 4 level 2s, but that's fine because the level 2 quality was quite low overall. They're just kind of power cards. The Sokka actually has quite a good secondary effect, but you don't want to play it at 4 because his power gets quite low on the opponent's turn. Whereas Zhao keeps the power even though it's not as high, and actually has the encore for discarding a character, which is pretty decent. So I like the little bit of variety there at level 2. So that's perfectly fine. We've obviously bumped Zuko up to 4 copies, the event up to 4 copies. We'll keep the Iroh back up at 2 because it's always nice to have a little bit of that, and we have taken some of the more kind of focus on like character power out of the deck. So I think holding on to this is a reasonable kind of thing. We've kept the 2 copies of this just because we need more options at 1. Whereas I don't think I would have been happy if all we had was just the 4 Zukos at this level. But I think the fact that this searches for kind of whatever we want, and we all overall have some kind of reasonable stuff here, is actually quite good. Not to mention the fact that there is the early play stuff here of like you can play the level 3 Aang at level 2 with the use of this card, and I think that the deck is an improvement here. Now obviously this first section of the video is not too much of an upgrade because it still fundamentally is missing a secondary climax combo, and there are just core weaknesses that like the card quality overall isn't as super high as you would want. But that is, I think, the 2 trial decks mixed together. So we are back. Excuse the color change of certain cards in certain sleeves. It's just the way I kind of have the cards organized in terms of like planning this video, where like I had to do some of the deck building, of course, ahead of time. Otherwise the video would just be like really all over the place. So the card here is what we left off with. This is our 2 trial decks added together with no additions from anything else. Now let's adjust the deck further, but now we're going to bring in cards from the booster set. But like I said, we're going to use the restriction, only the commons and uncommon cards from the set. So the cheap cards that you'll be able to buy multiple copies of for just a couple of cents. Because the rares and double rares especially are going to be more expensive cards, and even though you can acquire them somewhat easily, at that point we're changing up the deck so drastically, it's not really the trial deck anymore. So we're still trying to fundamentally only make kind of small additions to the deck and still keep it roughly the same, but make massive improvements. So the one thing we were just unable to do with just 2 trial decks was have a second climax combo. And that's where we need to straight away talk about replacing the other climax card in the trial deck, Stuck in a Blizzard. It is unique in Avatar because it's the only climax card with the wind symbol there, but I don't think it's enough that it doesn't combo with anything just to have a nice kind of trigger icon. So straight away, we are going to be getting rid of all 4 copies of this. That means we need 4 climax cards. And the other restriction that we're going to use here is just to keep deck building, especially here for the trial deck, simple. We are only going to use blue and yellow cards. Now, technically, we'd only really be using red and green level 0s, just so to not overcomplicate deck building. But I'm going to keep the restriction of just only blue and yellow cards. So what that actually means is that it really heavily limits us with what we can do. It does effectively choose for us, though, a specific climax card and combo. So with all that out of the way, the only card that has it's a common climax card, and then it has a common or uncommon card that it works with, is this combo. It is the Reunion with the Group climax card here that combos with Aang Missing Companion. This is actually the combo that I got to exclusively reveal, because Bushiroad included me as part of the previews for the set. So we're actually going to add this in. So we have 4 copies of the level 2 Aang Missing Companion and 4 copies of Reunion with the Group. So straight away, I already took out the climax card. So our new climax card will go in. Note how the effect is basically the same. The only difference is obviously the name of the card, and then we have the choice trigger icon, which means we should give some attention to the amount of characters who have a trigger icon. So obviously level 0s don't really have it, but you'll notice all of our level 2s and 3s have the sole trigger icon. So realistically, once we have about 10, 11, 12 of them, we should be pretty good with the choice trigger icon overall. But just having the combo here is going to be nice. Now, the good thing for deck building is that this card basically brings another card along with it. The effect that we're actually getting when we do the combo here is that when we play Reunion with the group and we have 6 or less cards in our hand and we have another character, so relatively easy conditions to meet, we get to search the deck for a card called Appa Lost and put it on the stage straight from the deck. So that's really good. And then that Appa will get the effect when it reverses a battle opponent. You can put the top card of your deck into your stock, which is great. Now, the card Appa Lost is pretty decent. It's also a level 2, 7,000 power, but if you attack and you have other characters, it gets 3,000. So it's 10,000 power, and then it might be boosted by some other stuff. And it also has an on reverse effect where it can kind of protect itself. So it swings in for 10k, reverses the opponent, and it basically like phases out. It goes into memory until your turn, so it avoids opponents' attacks. So you can really keep this thing in play. So it's a pretty nice combo that fills up the board at level 2, but also at level 1, because the other effect of this card says experience. If a copy of this card itself is in your level, this card gets -1 level in your hand. So you can do this at level 1. You can get these 2 cards out at level 1 and potentially do other stuff if you happen to have multiple copies. So straight away, we need to make some space to put in 4 copies of this card. And I think this is the point at which we could just accept our level 2 lineup isn't great. So there's some decent power there, but we prefer the combo potential that this offers. So we're just going to do a straight swap. The 2 copies of the Sokka from the trial deck and the 2 copy of the Zhao from the trial deck will go away. And that will put in our 4 copies of the Aang Missing Companion. And there's our climax combo. But we need to make some space for some Appa Losts. But the question is, how many copies do we play? How many to make this work? Now keep in mind the restriction of the wording of the card. It says, search your deck for the card. So when you get to the point where you're doing the climax combo, there has to be a copy of Appa Lost in your deck. If it's in your hand, that doesn't work. If it's in your waiting room, doesn't work. If it's in your clock, your level, doesn't work. So to me, the fact that it's pretty specific to deck, it means you have to play more than 1 copy. I think 2 is probably too little. 4 is probably too much and is pushing the amount of level 2s in the deck a little high. So I think this is one of the rarest opportunities where you just play 3 copies of a card. So we're going to play 3 copies of Appa Lost. And the question now is, what do we actually get rid of? In my mind, this is going to be our kind of power play. So what we're actually going to do is 2 of the copies of Katara protecting Aang, to me, will go away. And that will make space for 2 copies of Appa Lost. So, and then we just need to make space for the remaining 1. So we're adjusting our level 3 and 2 slightly again, maybe back to kind of what it was like originally, but we still have more level 3s than we initially had. It just means that we're not prioritizing using Katara protecting Aang as much anymore, and instead we're leaning into using this level 2 combo that we do have here. So it's at this point, I would say, we'll probably take out 1 copy of the Iroh Stern Warning, the backup, because I think we have a solid amount of power now, so that will allow us to put the 3rd one in there. So the deck is still at 50 at this point. Then let's talk about some other cards that we can add in. One quite interesting card in the booster set in yellow is this card. It's a common. It's Gyatso Mentor. Now, why is this so kind of notable when it comes to the trial deck? Its effect, the activate effect, says, pay 1 stock and put this card, which is standing up, hasn't been used, into your memory. Choose an Aang missing companion, which is this card here that we just added in, or Aang avatar state, which is this card. So it's a very interesting card that kind of, it's from the booster set, but it relates to a card in the trial deck. You don't really see that too much in the booster sets. And then it seems to almost pair these two up, because if you're playing both these cards, this allows you to adjust on the fly, because it's only a level 1, and it's a relatively easy to activate a cost of just like 1 stock to get this or this, your 2 climax combo cards, into your hand from the waiting room. And then its effect in memory actually boosts the power of one of your characters with Aang in its name by 500. So and when you play at the beginning of your climax phase, yeah, so every turn you get to choose a character and an Aang and give it 500, which is quite decent. So this is going to be quite similar in the deck to what this is doing, where we have multiple ways to get the Avatar State Aang into our kind of hand with this, and then this will allow us to play the Avatar State Aang early. So but we still are going to consider it like that. So it's not a 4-copy card, but I think it's a 2-copy card to just add consistency to the deck. So that's what we're going to do here, is we're going to get rid of the other Iroh backup. We'll put 1 copy in because of that. And at this point, I'll get rid of 1 copy of Katara New Necklace to put the other copy in as well. But now our ratios are kind of going a little bit off at this point, and we want to kind of adjust them a little bit. So one thing that's now becoming coming into play in the deck is that there is a few cards that directly reference other cards, and so there is the potential that these effects don't go off depending on where cards are. So we would like to have a card that can kind of almost put cards back into the deck from the waiting room, and yellow has that in this Momo card, Momo Winged Lemur. 2 interesting effects that I think actually really help the deck. So the first one is return 2 World of Avatar cards from your waiting room to your deck. So great, you could put your Appa's Losts back into your deck, something like that if you want to, then you shuffle your deck. And then what you get to do is you get to boost the power of a character by 1 soul. So you get to give +1 soul for that effect. Its other effect is also when you play it. You pay a stock and discard a climax card from your hand to the waiting room, and you get to choose a climax card and add it to your hand. So it's climax swap, which is quite good. Because a lot of times you will find yourself with the yellow in hand when you need the blue climax. Like you have this card ready to go, but you only have the blue. You know, the reverse of what you need. This allows you to swap that around. It allows you to just make the deck run a little smoother as well. So the Momo is actually a quite nice card, given that we have a few very specific combos going on here. That could be quite helpful. So again, not a 4-copy of card, but we want to add 2 copies of this into the deck at level 0. So So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to, at this point, take out 2 copies of the Aang and Zuko, because we don't need that so much anymore. And we'll just add that in here on the side. So there we go. We have the two of the Aang and Zuko, now 2 of the Momo. And for the most part, I think you can actually use the deck like that. The one adjustment that I kind of have made is sort of that we replace 1 copy of Katara's necklace, maybe 2 copies, with the level 1 yellow event, Yip Yip. This is just to maybe add a little bit of event variety to the deck, because this one allows you to just search your deck for a character, but you do have to discard a card, whereas this one just is on play, search your waiting room, and there's no cost. But it also has the kind of counter effect of basically swapping positions of characters and kind of evading attacks. It's one of those ones where I think there's a little bit of your personal choice there. Do you stick to the 4 Katara's necklace, given that it's sort of like combos with the Zuko up here can actually get it? And in a way, because the Zuko can search it from the waiting room, I almost feel like you don't need as many copies of it. So that's why I do include the one copy of Yip Yip, just to have something a little bit different. And because we did remove the backups from the deck, I think this is actually a reasonable way to kind of make the deck work. So you can see kind of what we've kind of ended up switching up to here. We have 6 level 3s. We now have 7 level 2s. Our level 1 count is now 12. And our level 0s is 6, 10, 14, 15, 17 level 0s. I think that's pretty solid overall, where we have a high end, and we still have the consistency of, you know, our brainstorm, our searcher. The Katara can come in useful on occasion with the being able to basically filter a card from your hand. The UA is a nice power boost card. And now that we also have the Momo added, kind of different type of power boost and a different type of kind of utility effect with the climax swap, and it helps with the consistency on, say, like the Appa and this combo. That's actually pretty nice. This level 0 adds the ability to play the Aang at level 2, which is quite useful, definitely. And that's the thing with this deck now, is that we have these 2 different early play options. We can play our level 3 Aang at level 2, but we can also play our big level 2 combo that we just added at level 1. And because of the way the combo works, we get our 2 new level 2s at level 1. And that is a major power play, because especially if you do get like 2 Appas on board, that's pretty big. Because again, the way the Aang Missing Companion works is that it's just on play. It doesn't require you to attack. So you can actually play maybe like one of these in the back row, and then when you activate it, straight away get the Appas to the front row and kind of do it that way. So that is pretty nice. I would say the one weakness of the deck, where maybe there are some options from the rest of the set, would probably be, say, like this, where we still have the 2 Aang trapped in a cave, which is a relatively generic card. I definitely think the slot needs to be a level 1 character and with relatively decent power, just because otherwise the Gyatso is more of a kind of, again, utility card, because it can search for this, or kind of combo plays, and add a little bit of power. The events are just in generally like good, searching, doing what we need. But we're maybe lacking a little bit for, like, if we get the wrong cards, if we don't get level Zuko at level 1, or we don't immediately have this setup at level 1, that's maybe the point at which the deck can maybe have a little bit of trouble. But that's why we have the whole brainstorm at level 0, search at level 0, some of that kind of hand filtering stuff. And then because of the restrictions I kind of put into play here, there's not that many great kind of like level 1 options to kind of like add in. Like from the set, you have stuff like, you know, you can maybe add in like Appa Ready to Fight if you want more protection, but it's not super high power level. There's Momo Loneliness if you want to counter your opponent kind of leveling up kind of quite quickly. Katara High Society is definitely one I might consider, because it's 4,500, but like when you play it, it becomes 5,500, and then it boosts the power of another character on the field. So it's an interesting option. The level 1, cost 1, Katara is an interesting kind of like assist card that also has a decent power level for level 1, and her other effect kind of combos well with one of our climax cards as well. Sokka Warm Welcome is an option. Tui and Law is an option for something very, very different. Again, that is returning all your cards in your waiting room into your deck, shuffle your deck. If the 2 Momos aren't doing enough for you, then maybe this is an option. But again, I think this is maybe a slot where you're looking at kind of higher power. And ultimately, this going up to 65, if you have a full board, I think is probably what we want. It's a little simple, but I think it's just the kind of power kind of that we actually need at that level. So I've done a little bit of testing with this deck here, and I think it does work relatively well. So let me just set it up here, and I'll just give you guys just a sense for the deck functioning a little bit differently than the like stock trial deck. Okay, just to show you a little bit of sort of strategy about sort of like how you play the deck. So just kind of organizing the cards a little bit differently. Of course, your 2 climax combos are like your big things, in that you've got your level 3 blue Ang and Fear of the Ocean Spirit, and then you've got your yellow level 2 Ang Missing Companion. But remember, this can be early played at level 1, and this can be early played at level 2, which is where some of the other cards come into play. So, obviously Ang helps himself become a level 1 combo by putting a copy of himself into the level, which of course the easiest way to do that is, for instance, if you draw your opening hand of 5 cards, and if your opening hand has the level 2, keep it. Don't mulligan this one away. Instead, on your turn, draw for turn, clock the level 2 Ang, draw your next 2 cards. That way, this is in your clock, so when you take 6 more damage, use this card to level up, it's in your level, and then suddenly future copies of this card are all now level 1. That's the whole idea of this card. It's like in the early turns, if you see a copy of this, hold on to it, and during one of your turns, clock it into the clock, of course, to do the draw. Or if it happens to flip over early as damage, you just make sure you choose it as a level marker, of course, because you need to do that early, otherwise you're just at level 2 already. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing that is quite important with the combo here in yellow is to keep a track of where the 3 Appa's losts are, because you can absolutely get into a situation where you just completely lose track of where the 3 copies of it are. And it's kind of why we play 3 copies and not 2, and why there maybe perhaps is an argument to be made for playing 4 copies of it, because what if it's just a little bit like all over the place? Like, what if you lose track of those 3 copies? Because there are a bunch of different places that it can be. Like, you can have a copy, you know, there could be like 1 copy in your deck, 1 in the waiting room. Maybe one of them was flipped over as stock. And, you know, it can get kind of tricky. Like, if you want to do a double climax combo with 2 Ang missing companions to get 2 Appa losts onto the field, if there's not 2 in the deck, you can't do it twice. So that's where it is important, like, for instance, when flipping cards into stock, remember what's in the stock and what isn't in the stock. And that's kind of an important one, which is why the Momo is particularly important with this kind of combo, to make sure that when you get to a certain point, like if you know perhaps that all the Appas are out of the deck, use the Momo, especially if they're in the waiting room, to return 1 or 2 of them back into the deck ahead of using the climax combo. So you do have to remember that. It can also be like, maybe if you know there's 1 in your deck, then maybe you don't want to do the brainstorm that turn. Maybe you don't want to flip 5 into the waiting room, because what if you flip this and you ruin your whole climax? It is the one thing with a card like this, that it's 1 card specifically referencing another in the deck. You do have to keep track of where it is. Really, really important. So that's also hugely important. Now, with the level 3 combo, which you can do at level 2 because of Katara and Sokka's siblings, again, it's a sort of a situation where you should be using a lot of your cards that you can like search for to get this at some point. Now, it's not something you maybe keep from the early parts of the game, but maybe that once you get this combo going at level 1 or even at level 2, you should be leaning towards then trying to find a copy of this to put on the field. Also getting a copy of Aang Avatar State in your hand at level 2. And that's why something like Gyatso Mentor is so important, because you can just pay a stock, get rid of this into memory to get a copy of this or this, your 2 kind of key cards. But again, it gets it out of the waiting room, which is why you do want to dump quite a few cards into the waiting room, which again, you kind of risk this combo maybe going away because of that, but that's why the Momo is kind of quite important as well. So all that stuff is, you know, really, really important to note, which is why, you know, cards that can get stuff like out of the waiting room are also quite important as well. So Katara's Necklace can get stuff out of the waiting room. Yip Yip can search from the deck. Zuko's secondary effect can get a Katara's Necklace out of the waiting room, or a character card directly out of the waiting room also. Your drop search, the Aang, is also really, really important to make stuff happen as well. That's where you're just focused on the amount of sources in your deck to actually kind of make some of that stuff actually happen and come together. Other than that, the climax kind of thing I was talking about as well, that's where the other side of the Momo comes into play, because it can allow you to basically swap between cards. This is why the Momo is like super, super important, in that the Momo can suddenly make your combo go from being, I can't do it at all, to being, actually, no, I can do it in full. Because theoretically what the Momo can do is, it can, like, let's say what you have in your hand is like this. Let's just say you have some stock or something like that. You have, like, say this on the field, and this should be in the waiting room. Yeah, like say this is like your board or something like that. You have this, you got this onto the board, but you have the blue climax in your hand. You have Momo, but also there's a problem. You don't have the yellow climax, and you know for sure all of the Appa's Lost are not in the deck. That's what the Momo is so important for. Just put the Momo onto the field, both effects activate. So the first one is 2 characters from your waiting room get shuffled back into the deck, something gets +1 soul, and pay a stock, you get to swap a climax card in your hand for one in the waiting room. And just like that, the combo is live. You can play this, it activates the Aang gets out the Appa, and then, like, especially like if you had multiple copies of this on the field, like stuff like that is super important to focus on. And obviously once you get that combo going, that's really good, because of course this gets potentially you an extra stock. You're attacking like 2 or 3 times that turn, so you get more stock, and that just kind of helps to kind of keep you going. And again, you're using your Gyatsos to continuously get these into your hand, get the Avatar State Aang into your hands, and actually get your kind of combinations kind of actually going and moving. And there's some really kind of cool stuff that you can actually do, because a lot of times you kind of do want to do that, because you can kind of keep the board filled up if you keep track of the Appas with the yellow combo. Because most of the time you probably, with the Aangs, you kind of want to build to a turn where you can do the blue combo, where you have multiple Aangs on board. Like the dream obviously is to have like 3 of them on board, and then you play Fury of the Ocean Spirit, because then all of a sudden you're doing like 1 damage and then the attack damage, 1 damage and then the attack damage, and so on. So there's effectively, it's a kind of pseudo 6 attacks, because there are 6 chunks of damage coming at the opponent that way, and that's why it is a finisher, is because it does the damage in that way. Whereas like even if they cancel everything, they've gone through like all their climax cards in that case, you're going to get some damage through that way. So that is what the deck is kind of trying to do, and you can see where the consistency actually is. There's obviously stuff you can do to adjust, like for instance some of the level 2s in the deck, like maybe you want to bring maybe copies of that level 2 Iroh back into play. Maybe at level 0 you might want to have maybe another copy of Aang and Zuko Unexpected Cooperation, just to have a little bit more power going on. But otherwise, I think this is just a net improvement for the deck overall. It is just doing so much more than what it was before. And again, I would even say that this is a massive difference, just the built version of the deck versus even just 2 trial decks together. Like, how much extra consistency and like just stuff is added to the deck just because it has the other climax combo is so much better. Because you'll remember, The only other real combo in the original deck was the bond pair, like trapped in a cave, Zuko and Aang, and that wasn't even that good. Whereas this is a full-on like combo play where you can get 2 level 2s out at level 1, with the climax combo. So that's sort of the idea of how this one is kind of meant to play, of course. So in that sense, it's a deck that's just trying to do some early play stuff and still be consistent in the early game, but then search for the tools to make the early plays happen. But then you kind of transition into like actually at level 3, you can still just play the Aangs for like the normal cost. Maybe this is where the Kataras that you're playing begin to come into play as well, and you can use the protection effect to protect the Aangs, so you can get to your next turn where you can do your combo, of course, and that's what's fantastic about it. Similarly, the trigger icons on the climaxes also come into play here. The choice is very nice because it can get you cards into hand when you need it, but it can get you stock when you need it as well. And then this, of course, the kind of gate icon or whatever way you want to call it, gets you a climax card out of the waiting room, which can be useful for, again, either one. Because you have the idea of like what does each climax combo do? You have a sort of attack finisher, and then you have a kind of like board swarm kind of type one. So the deck is doing quite a few different things, and I think that's what makes it actually pretty decent. Now, is it going to compete super well against some of the other potentially more constructed decks? I wouldn't say it will compete super well, but I think there is a core consistency to what it's doing, that like these are just like simple fundamentals, early play at 2 different levels. Is the power level crazy high on both of them? Not especially, but it's still doing stuff, and if your opponent's deck doesn't fully come together, this certainly has a decent bit of potential there. And like I said, it's a low budget, low rarity upgrade to the trial deck, and in my mind it makes it work. Definitely it makes it work. So yeah, going forward, I'll be doing some other videos on decks in the Avatar set. I put up a poll. People seem to want to see the red Azula deck up first. So basically, once some of the single card order that I placed, because I need to get more copies of a few key cards from the set, once they come in, I will get working on that Azula deck and see how it goes. But I guess that one will be using the kind of broken combo of the Azula with the level 0 Sokka rare. That's quite interesting. So I'm interested to put that one together. But yeah, trial deck pretty good. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.